Celebrations on the streets of Beirut. Lebanon's Prime Minister announces his resignation. But what happens now? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. For 2 weeks, thousands of anti-government protesters have blocked major streets in Beirut and cities across Lebanon, paralyzing the country. Schools, banks and some businesses remain closed. Protesters are calling for government leaders to resign and be held accountable for years of corruption and economic mismanagement. On Tuesday, Prime Minister Saad Hariri bowed to their demands and announced his resignation.
For 13 days, the Lebanese people have waited for a decision, for a political solution that would stop the deterioration. I have tried during this period to find a way out, to listen to the people's voices, and to protect the country from economic, security, and social dangers. Today, I will not hide it from you. I have reached a dead end.
For more now on the political crisis in Lebanon, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Beirut is Habib Battah. He's an independent journalist and editor of the news site BeirutReport.com. Also with us from Istanbul is Luna Safwan. She's a Lebanese freelance journalist and communications specialist. Here with us in the studio is Mounzer Sleiman. He's the founder and director of the Center for American and Arab Studies. And from London, Abdel Atwan is the editor-in-chief of the digital Arabic news and opinion site al-Youm. Thank you to everyone for being with us. Habib Battah, let's start in Beirut. Prime Minister Saad Hariri initially announced his resignation, but now he says he's willing to head a new government. What's the latest you're hearing there?
Well, that would be a caretaker government, so it would be a temporary government, and that's what the protesters want to see, a change in hands to form a new government. People really want to see new faces. They want to see, they don't want to see the same old faces. They've seen these faces for 20, 30, some families have been in power in Lebanon for 100 years. So they really want a new shake-up, and some are still waiting out to see if the government actually does change. They want to hold them accountable, but there is a new political culture in Lebanon right now that's trying to hold the people accountable, and I think that every move they make will be watched very closely.
Luna Safwan, one of the demands of the protesters, the resignation of the Prime Minister, has been met. Saad Hariri has resigned. But what are the core grievances of the protesters?
Well, there's a series of demands that's been in place, actually. The resignation of the cabinet is excellent. It's an excellent demand to be met, even if after 13 days, but we have a whole pool of demands that the people are insisting on. The important thing right now to focus on very well is what this government will do and whom will it be formed of and who will head it. And these are the discussions that people are having right now. Who will be the person to head this government? Will it be a familiar face? Will it be someone new, someone who is a part of the civil society? And how will everyone come into terms of agreement on this specific person who will also have to choose a pile of people and of ministers to govern this cabinet with?
Mounzer Sleiman, the Lebanese President Michel Aoun, he's been saying that he's ready to sit down and negotiate on the way forward. Let's watch and listen to what he had to say.
My call to demonstrators: I am ready to meet your representatives that carry your concerns, to listen to your specific demands. You will hear from us about our fears over financial collapse. We will discuss what we can do together to achieve your objectives without causing collapse and chaos.
So, Mounzer, here's the issue. The president says, I want to negotiate. Who does he negotiate with?
That's probably the weakest link of the situation. There is a genuine demonstration across sectors, religion, economic background, etc. But there is always the chance or the opportunity for someone to hijack this kind of genuine demonstration. And the problem, there is some political organization who are in the mixed. And there is some political organization in Lebanon who they traditionally want to change, but they were not well organized, whether on the left or center or to the right, if we want to use the American system. The problem here is that they did not announce their willingness to negotiate and to forward some representative representation of them, you know, some representative, and that's creating a vacuum. There is, in Lebanon, they should be wise enough to know from after all the experience of the so-called Arab Spring, which is, this is, some people call it, this is the late Arab Spring, whatever you want to call it. They should be wise that changes in Lebanon in particular need to be incremental. And they should have focused on some major demand, drastic demand, to change the political system from confessional system to civilian, non-sectarian system, especially the election law.
Right.
And if they could do that, then they could form government based on that, and that all the other demands can be implemented. Unfortunately, we have a situation now that we probably could go to square one by having Saad Hariri again, because the consultation going to either produce Saad Hariri to be nominated or another person from the similar situation. We're not in a situation, I'm not optimistic about having some other personnel, although I prefer, let's say, to have a woman be named as a prime minister, and then that at least symbolically would send the signal that there is going to be change.
That would be a change. But let's look at the protesters themselves. I mean, these are people, hundreds of thousands of people, who have come onto the streets spontaneously. There is no structure within the protest movement, is there?
No, there is some sort of coordinating haphazard committees, it seems to me.
It's spontaneous.
But spontaneous, but to a certain degree, it's not completely spontaneous. Why? When you have certain people who are trying to forward slogans of insults, of concentrating on certain personalities or certain things, and especially introducing personal insult to the political arena. This has reduced the credibility and the kind of seriousness of what you're doing. You are not there just to insult people. You are there to advance ideas. So I think it is going to be at some point clear that who are the people who could advance themselves and present papers or present themselves, and that going to probably bring the situation to more calm instead of having the closure of the roads and the closure of the university, schools, and the banks and stuff. Lebanon should continue to move normally, and the protesters should continue to demand what they are demanding for real change in Lebanon.
All right, let me bring in Abdel Bari Atwan from London. Abdel Bari Atwan, is Saad Hariri the man to actually lead Lebanon out of this crisis? There is so much dissatisfaction with him right now. I mean, he will play a role as a caretaker prime minister, but do we need change at the top?
To be honest, this man was tested and he failed to deliver. I'm surprised why there is some sort of insistence that he should be reappointed again and form a new government. This definitely wouldn't please or satisfy the demands of the protester, as Dr. Mounzer said. We cannot go back to square one again. You know, this man is there and he failed. So why there is insistence to actually reappoint him again? I believe the people in the streets, they would like to change, you know, a full change of the political system. They would like to change the sectarianism, which actually destroyed Lebanon and created this crisis, whether economic crisis or political crisis. We have to remember those people are young and vigorous, and they would like a change, a real change. So the challenge now, to please the old-fashioned political group or elite, or to please and meet the demands of the people in the streets. I believe this is the biggest challenge facing the political system in Lebanon. So personally, I do expect a lot of vacuum. I can see the crisis actually going on and on. I know that through my own sources that there are foreign intervention already started. Hezbollah, the major power, I mean political and military power, is worried that there is a conspiracy to disarm the Hezbollah and disarm their troops. So I think the coming day is crucial, and I believe Hariri is not the suitable man to lead the government again.
Habib Battah, what are your thoughts on that? we can see that to a large extent these protests are being led by economic grievances. In fact, the International Monetary Fund said that Lebanon needs to introduce reforms on its economy to restore stability, to restore some kind of confidence in the country. But there is a big question mark now over the leadership, as we've just heard. What do you think?
Well, I think that there has been a lot of political organizing in Lebanon over the last 10 years or so. And it's not just this protest that we're seeing today, but there have been many activist groups that have run for elections, and we had a record number of candidates in our last election in Lebanon a little over a year ago. So I think there are many people who are actually, new organizations are happening right now. There's all these roadblocks have been organized by local councils, people who come from the area, very local politics, people who just live and know each other, are neighbors, organizing these things. That's what I've heard from the protesters. So I think they're in a good position to actually organize for future elections. And I think that the demand now is to have elections within 6 months or so you can have actually a parliament. When the president says, I'm going to meet with your representatives, I think he's missing the whole point here, is that the representatives that people have elected, they don't feel that they're representing them, because there's hundreds of thousands of people in the streets and nobody where is their representative? Obviously they feel like they're not being represented very well, because the election laws in Lebanon are written in a way the same parties stay in power. And also we have to ask the international community, what do they want for Lebanon? Because we know that in Lebanon, the leadership doesn't always decide what they want to do on their own will. They have a lot of foreign funding from the United States, from Iran, from Saudi Arabia, from France. These countries have a big interest in what happens in Lebanon. So will they allow Lebanon to be free and independent? That's another big question, but I'm not so worried about the people. And I also think that this worry about their curses and stuff like that, well, people actually have been in pain for 30 or 40 years, have been beaten down, so they kind of, I think, have a right to get a little bit angry. And by the way, the politicians themselves have come to power through violence and cursing. So it's not a surprise that people actually react the same way to that. But I think we have a very strong showing here from the public. They've showed the politicians that they're not in control anymore, that they actually have some power too. People have grown up living in fear of these people, and now they have shown that they can actually stop the country, not just them. So, I mean, there's a lot of free expression happening right now. It's been building for a while now, independent politics in Lebanon, a post-sectarian politics. That's what's happening in Lebanon. That's what's the most exciting thing. But it won't happen overnight, that's for sure.
So what you're talking about is very fundamental change, because Lebanon has a very complex system in its electoral system. I mean, people are elected according to proportional representation, representing their sectarian representation, really. So are you calling for that system to go away? Because I'm just kind of wondering, how will elections resolve the problems right now?
Well, I mean, there are all these new parties that are out there, and they can be voted. Even within the sectarian system, you can actually have some change where you have, new faces who have a reform agenda or have been working in civil society for a long time. Been working on human rights, been working on infrastructure issues. The big problem in Lebanon is that it's a broken country, and there's a big wealth gap. So that the rich people in Lebanon don't pay any taxes, really, and the poor people are paying the brunt of the taxes in the country. And they're driving around their Lamborghinis and their Ferraris, and people actually don't have, living on $2 a day. So, there has to be fundamental change in the social distribution of the wealth in the country and the social contract, which we really never had one. We never had a real post-war reconciliation in this country.
Yeah, Mounzer, let me ask you this. The current system, the sectarian system, is that sustainable?
No, I mean, it should be. This is one of the golden opportunity for Lebanon. That it is time to change, to reform, at least. Change or reform. And I think a mature movement should be open to both options. The option of the reform and to push the reform to the maximum possible, or change completely the electoral system. We cannot call an election and it's not going to change. 5 to 10 maybe deputies new in the parliament will not change the situation, according to our friend who just spoke. You need to change the election system. The election system, you have the force of the street to organize and push the current government to change that. You insist this is the primary issue we're going to do. If they do that, there's two options here. Either to change it completely, to have Lebanon as one electoral state, unity, or to have, according to older system, we can elect only 30% of the parliament. And the 70%, let's say, would be as non-sectarian, not based on anything.
Okay.
So that,
So
would lead you to have 2/3 majority in the incremental. What I'm calling for, I am probably looking for drastic change more than the protester in Lebanon, because I'm originally from there. But I would think that, realistically speaking, we should be open to a drastic, concrete reform that really could please the people, and that could put Lebanon on the course of fighting corruption and energizing the economy and stopping any foreign interference. And there was one also additional issue. The interference now in the internal politics and the demonstration could lead to problem and friction among reviving what happened during the civil war.
All right, I want to go to Luna Safwan in Istanbul. Luna, you know, we're hearing calls here for fundamental changes in Lebanon's electoral system. Do you think there is the political will among Lebanon's leaders for the kinds of changes that we're hearing?
I think that we have a very good base. Honestly, some people think that we're being over-optimistic, but I think that we have a very good political base that was proven in the municipality elections that happened months ago. There are independent candidates. There are groups that are regrouping and that are doing a lot of base work to actually get into the political game in a very clean manner, in a very on a very transparent level. And I think that this, of course, needs a new electoral law. It's the responsibility of the new cabinet that is to be elected and of the parliament. But also, I think that we do have a very good political independent base. The civil society has grown so much in the past years in Lebanon.
Right, Luna, if you look at some of the proposals being presented right now, in the very short term, Prime Minister Hariri recently presented a reform package, and part of that package included things like no new taxes and a 50% cut in ministerial salaries. He's also said, look, he's prepared to bring in new elections if that's what's needed. Will that resolve the situation in the short term?
I think it was a very unrealistic package. It was a very dreamy package that ex-Prime Minister Hariri offered to the protesters just to tone down what's happening in the streets and to avoid maybe some sort of chaos or, you know, but I think that it was very unrealistic. Of course, having the elections earlier, but based on a new electoral law would be a good start and would be an optimistic start. But the rest of the package that was given in the reform paper, it's very optimistic for short term. And why wasn't this implemented before? This cabinet had years, and these ministers had years to work on this. So why was it only represented lately within a frame of 48 hours? So this was very fishy to everyone, and the protesters and the people in the street, they really did not buy this, and this is why they kept on pushing and pushing.
Abdel Bari, Atwan, that's a great question that Luna poses there. Why wasn't this done before?
Well, to be honest, first, you know, when Hariri suggested that he should actually cut the salaries of those ministers, how much he is going to save? That you know, the debts of Lebanon is more than $100 billion. So this is just talking about fractions. But anyway, what I want to say, Lebanon needs a very strong government. We have 3 presidents recently on the Middle East. The one in Algeria, which changed the whole system, and there will be a new election. The experience of Sudan, we have seen people in the street, and they did not stop until they changed the political system completely and share power with the military establishment for a temporary period. And then we have the Tunisian experience, which is very, very significant. They are changing the whole system, and we have a new president from the streets of Tunisia. Very humble, very honest, very actually clean. So that's what Lebanon needs. We cannot actually accept half solution or a quarter of a solution. We need a full change in order to actually take Lebanon out of this crisis. I don't believe the people in the streets, who are young people, as I said, you know, will accept any half solution or they are half compromise. No, there should be a strong government, professional government. I mean, from people, new faces, young people who are highly educated in order to take the country out of its problem. This is the real challenge facing the Lebanese people and facing the old establishment, the old political establishment. There's young people, they are hungry for changes.
Right.
If their demands are not met properly, I believe there will be some sort of infighting, unfortunately, in Lebanon, between the people, maybe armed infighting. We don't know yet, but I'm really not optimistic here.
Yeah. Habib Battah, Hezbollah is one of the most powerful political parties in Lebanon. It's been calling for its followers to stay away from these protests, and it's also warning that there could be a power vacuum in Lebanon if these protests continue. This is what the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah had to say. Let's listen.
I am scared for the country. We are scared for the country. We are scared that there might be someone who wants to take Lebanon and create social, political and security tensions that would lead to civil war.
So what do you make of what you heard there, Habib? I mean, what role is Hezbollah playing here?
I mean, all of this fear-mongering is from the handbook of dictators. We've seen this all over the world where they say, if you don't trust in us, you're going to have violence in the streets. And they've actually tried, but they've failed. They've tried to, infiltrate the protest with sending some men with sticks to beat people. Yesterday, they burned some tents, but people at the end of the day came back and filled the square again. And they've tried that several times now. They're making up all these rumors about people fighting in the streets. People are very nice in the protests. I've been to all the protests in Lebanon. They're people you feel like they're your brothers and their sisters. They're singing, they're happy, they're celebrating the fact that they have power now. And I am optimistic, I think, in the long term. I think it might not be overnight thing, but I've been covering corruption in Lebanon for 20 years now.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to get people riled up about this because they've become placated. But to see people out there in the streets demand their rights, I think they're going to really hold them accountable. I think that the protesters are ready to take the streets again. And the tires are still there. They're ready to put the tires back in the streets. They're on the side of the street right now. So I think that there is definitely a hope there. But now, you're right, Hezbollah is one of those very powerful, entrenched movements in the country. And you have to ask yourself, these political parties, how did they get so strong? How did they get into power? Well, they've given a lot of money and resources and jobs and help to people that they support. They have large institutions. They have schools. They have hospitals. They have universities. So, I mean, it's very hard to compete with that kind of patronage power that they have. But I feel that at least we can hope for. I don't think that we can expect everything to be achieved. I mean, a lot of these times when protests ask for everything, they don't have clear-cut goals. They don't really achieve them. But I think what we're seeing in a broader sense, in the long term, is a change in political culture. People are actually saying that, no, I have some rights too. I have some power. I'm not afraid anymore of you, and I'm going to watch your every move. And if you don't actually form the government that we like, we're ready to go back there and fight on a daily basis for water, electricity, basic services, healthcare. People don't even have those things in Lebanon.
I think this kind of demonstration about accusation of Hezbollah or his follower to be not part of the genuine movement is wrong. What Nasrallah in his party, by the way, are the least corrupted. I'm not going to say no corruption, but the least corrupted and the most people who sacrifice for the country to protection of the country.
You know, I have
so
to
they
bring
cannot be accused
when you talk about corruption, I have to bring this up.
Yeah.
There's a salacious story doing the rounds, and you know about this,
Yeah.
which is that Hariri,
$16 million, and they want him to be another prime minister.
he was having an affair with a South
Exactly.
African model and gave her $16 million.
And you don't know about the other things.
Right.
So I think it's really the wrong. We divert our attention from the real thing. The real thing, it's really naive to suggest that an election or early election by itself could change the political system in Lebanon.
Yeah.
What we need new electoral system, and that cannot be produced without negotiation between representative of the demonstration or the civil society as a whole, which means the political party that existed in power now and the political parties that they're not in power and the civil society. All together, they should come together with the government to negotiate and to come up with a new electoral system. That would lead to new election according to that. This is the real compromise. If they're not mature enough to think in that direction, all the demands that we're talking about, economic, about corruption, about everything, this is the government could implement later. It's not going to happen except for just have measures there's going to be, and no force to implement those measures, even if they agree on it. The only thing really is to take this golden opportunity and to look for drastic change. And I'm saying we have two options. Change completely that system, abolish it completely, or if we cannot, at least abolish 70% of it.
Okay.
That will be a step forward.
All right, Luna, do you see these demonstrations continuing in Lebanon?
I think that, of course, these demonstrations will continue. Right now, people are regrouping. Right now, people are just attending to their businesses, which has been closed for a while, and we have a lot of economical challenges. So it was a good way to regroup within these days, but the protests are staying in the squares. People are setting up more tents. However, everyone is conflicted about the roadblocks, whether or not there will be additional roadblocks or all roads will be opened, because roadblocks actually proved to be an effective way to make the voices be heard of the people. I don't think that it's fair in these demonstrations and within the frame of what's happening to exclude Hezbollah or any political party, no matter how less corrupt they were, from the responsibility of what's happening in Lebanon. Any political party who was less corrupt or who was not corrupt at all had the chance for the past 10, 15, 20 years to step up and to help, especially a political party as powerful as Hezbollah. I wonder where was Hezbollah when all of this corruption was happening. So because they have the means, they have the means and they have the ways. So where were they? I think that we're looking at a big map of all political parties, which all should be held responsible, equally or not equally. This is a different discussion, but I just wanted to emphasize on this point.
There's no question that all responsible for the situation in Lebanon. But now to single out the people who sacrificed the most for Lebanon and try to isolate them because there is a plan by United States to strangulate Hezbollah on his follower in Lebanon. And by the way, this is part of the economic collapse that's happening in Lebanon and the economic condition, because the United States is insisting of punishing the entire population of Lebanon based because they don't like Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a legitimate force in Lebanon and have in the government. Of course, they have responsibility, and that collective responsibility, and there should be, the demonstrator should be very sensitive to all parties, not to accuse anybody or insult anybody.
All right, let me go to Habib. Habib, I've just got a few seconds left, and I was wondering if you could tell us about these demonstrations and the role that social media is playing in them.
Yeah, I mean, social media has really been the engine for activism in Lebanon over the past decade or so, and that's how people organize. They get WhatsApp groups, they meet each other, they connect on Facebook groups, and all of this networking was not really possible before. In the old days in Lebanon, and the old generations might know, there was a protest, and you could beat up the protesters, and that would be it. But now the protest is online, so people regroup and they organize again. And one thing people have been demanding, and I think we need to know, is that we need transparency. We don't know which party is clean in Lebanon. We don't have figures and facts. We need to have actual financial transparency in the country. Just stop guessing and picking our favorites. There's a lot of money coming into Lebanon. Billions have come in, and people have not seen that money. And so there are a lot of questions to be asked by all the parties. And the main protest slogan has been Killon Yani Killon, which means all politicians.
And we have to leave it there. Thank you to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching. Hello everybody, I'm Anand Naidu. If you enjoy the thoughtful, engaged discussions you see on The Heat, you may also want to subscribe to our podcast. It's appropriately titled The Heat. Twice a week we take a deep dive on world headlines, talking to experts, journalists and others. It's a fresh, focused and intimate look at the issues that matter most. Whether it's the Hong Kong riots, the latest Middle East conflict or US politics, The Heat podcast gives the clear context needed to understand both what's going on and why. And what's best, we come to you. Whether you're at home or on the go, you can find The Heat podcast just about anywhere podcasts are found. Just search The Heat CGTN. Have a listen today and subscribe. Thanks.